Shadow of the Erdtree is releasing in the next few days, and I thought, why not just make a retrospective rundown of the main bosses in Elden Ring before it, to see how they stack up and maybe later compare them with the Shadow of the Erdtree bosses. I will be ranking all the major and relevant bosses after Shadow of the Erdtree comes out separately. So this is really just a last overlook of the experience I gathered fighting these bosses in the last 2 years. Disclaimer before the video starts, this is all my opinion and my ranking, so it's fine if you disagree with some of the takes. For example, I have no issues with people disliking a boss because they find it too hard or they don't enjoy learning it, but saying stuff is badly designed and bad just because you refuse to learn it is not valid in my opinion, and I will always harshly criticize that. Besides that, I think it's fair game to use anything the game offers you, like spirit ashes, summons, or weapons of any kind, and I think gatekeeping like that is very harmful for the community, so I condemn all of it. If you enjoy this content, this ranking, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe. It would help out the channel massively, and also be sure to hit the bell for notifications because there will be a lot of Shadow of the Erdtree content coming very soon. And with everything out of the way, let's get into the ranking. Before we get into the ranking proper, I just want to say I'm going to be mostly very positive on these bosses because I think the boss roster is genuinely just awesome in Elden Ring, and especially the main bosses are just fantastic. So if you expect an overly critical analysis of them, this is probably not the video where you find it. So, of course, as in every ranking, there needs to be a last place, and without a question, that for me is Fire Giant. Fire Giant is overall a pretty cool and solid boss. However, I also have some issues with him. The positive things about him are, first off, when you enter his arena and see this insane overview of the Erdtree, it was just a really cool moment to see how far you've actually come in the game. Really memorable on my first run, loved that. Besides that, I like his presentation a lot, especially the phase 2 cutscene. It's one of the coolest mid cutscenes in Elden Ring, and it's very memorable. Definitely one of my favorite things about this fight. Mechanically, this fight is solid. Phase 1 is a decent phase, actually a pretty solid giant enemy, if you ask me, and I also really enjoy that you use Torrent throughout this entire fight as a gap closer specifically. I really like when Elden Ring does that. Now the things I don't like. First off, this flame attack is just utterly atrocious, one of the worst moves in the game, and I have no idea what they were thinking designing this attack. And besides that, phase 2 is honestly great in concept, but the execution is pretty poor if you ask me. I wish the focus in this fight was that you knock down Fire Giant and get a massive riposte instead of this minuscule little bite. I don't know, it's just pathetic damage if you ask me. And that's not really possible because staggering him is not reliable because of his constant rolling away and escaping and the hands reduce damage. The concept is great, but I don't know, not a fan of the execution. However, with all that said, and even with the few negatives, I still think Fire Giant is a solid enough boss, but of course there needs to be a last place. Lich Dragon 46 has amazing lore, incredible presentation, a fantastic arena with a great skybox, and one of the best soundtracks in Elden Ring. His design is also just really fantastic. So how is this incredibly well made boss only in the B tier? Well, first off, getting to this boss is one of the most annoying remembrances to get to, especially because you need to fight fierce champions first, which is one of the worst bosses in the game in my opinion. But even if you reach this boss, he shares too many moves similar to the ancient dragons, which makes sense because he is an ancient dragon, but I would wish he had a bit more than just his glaives. And this fight is not like Midir where you're supposed to attack the hit. I mean, the hit takes more damage, but he's very squishy if you fight him this way, and it just doesn't feel that good in this fight. However, if you hide under him and attack him this way, he will reattach the lightning like every 2 to 3 seconds to you, which is sometimes very annoying. So mechanically, I don't think this fight is perfect. However, I like dodging his moves, and when you fight in front of him, it's honestly really fun sometimes, even though it ends very quickly because of his minuscule pool. So while 46 is a very solid dragon boss and overall a good boss fight, he's not surpassing Midir or the other Remembrance dragon boss in the game for me. But even with this, 46 is still a pretty solid fight with a god tier presentation, which still lands him into the good tier. Renala, Queen of the Full Moon, is yet another boss on the lower side of the ranking, however still far from a bad boss. This will be a very common theme because I think all bosses in Elden Ring share this, but her presentation once again is very good. I really enjoyed the atmosphere in phase 1, even though the fight is not very engaging in my opinion, but I still enjoy doing it, and I especially love the children singing along with the soundtrack. It just creates a very special atmosphere. Phase 2 soundtrack is just really nice and good. I really enjoy it. Plus, I really enjoy dodging her magic attacks. I think she's a great caster boss overall. Which I'm personally a bit iffy on are the summons. Sometimes they work quite well and it's really fun, but sometimes I'm not feeling it that much. So I think this boss is good and it's probably one of the highest B tiers I would give, but I still think there are a few things lacking for me to really call it a great boss. I think the Regal Ancestor Spirit is quite an underrated boss. Sure, most people probably didn't face him properly because he's balanced quite poorly and his HP pool is pretty low. And I also think it's meant to be more like an atmospheric fight and an experience rather than a challenging fight. But I think this boss has a really cool moveset, especially in phase 2 when he charges up. I love his charge, jump and roll attack. Those look very awesome visually and I really enjoy dodging them too. Besides that, his normal moves are quite fun for me too. I don't enjoy when he teleports through the whole area and I have to chase him, but I also don't really mind him. It's alright, but I would prefer if the distances were a bit shorter. But I think I need to mention the most important thing here, and that is just the atmosphere and the feel of this fight. The music is one of the most unique From Software soundtracks and it's absolutely amazing, especially the phase 2 part playing right now. And I don't know, this regal, majestic creature, just how it moves, it looks beautiful on a distance, but when you get close to it, it's gross and withered and rotten. It's just a fantastic design. I absolutely adore this. I understand people saying this maybe shouldn't be a Remembrance boss, but it is one and I think it's quite a great boss. I used to think it was like a B tier, but honestly on refights with low damage weapons and without getting hit, it's honestly just a very good boss and I really enjoy its moveset as well. My personal favorite things about the Estelle boss are its design and its mere existence. Cosmic Horror is very amazing and I love Bloodborne, it's my favorite game in the series, though Elden Ring probably will overtake it after Shadow of the Earth 3, and Estelle is just that, and not only that, he's one of the best looking ones. I think this threat of these aliens coming from space is one of the coolest aspects about Elden Ring and it's just insanely terrifying, especially with all the other outer gods plotting, and of course Greater Will being basically the main villain of the game. So that is very interesting. Also, I think the atmosphere in the Estelle fight is just very awesome. I love it so much. This fight is also great. I really enjoyed that they went for this hitting the head mechanic for most damage like Midir and Amygdala. I love Estelle's AoEs and I think they're the single hardest thing to dodge for me in the game. I still have no idea how to do it consistently, so I will learn with time probably. I think he shouldn't spam the meteor attack that much, but I love the grabs. Some people complain about the hitbox, but I just don't see it. I think it's a very fun to dodge attack. Maybe a hot take, but I really enjoy the recycled Estelle. For some people it took away from the first encounter and I kind of understand that, but for me it was a great moment because it terrified me even more. It made me realize, damn, there are just so many of them out there. I also really enjoy the full-grown Falling Star Beast. I think it's the closest to a minor boss that could have been considered a Remembrance boss but isn't. However, I think I slightly prefer Estelle even over it, and I think Estelle is just one of the coolest creatures From Software has ever designed. Dragon Lord Placidus X is just so damn cool. I think his amazing arena, his amazing design, and just the entire spectacle of this fight go a really long way to make this one of the most memorable boss fights and dragon boss fights by From Software. But not only is the presentation fantastic about this boss, I think his moveset is also amazing. First, I want to talk about the sound design in this fight. I think this fight is probably the best sound design and I absolutely adore the use of dynamic music in this fight. Especially one of the most memorable attacks in Elden Ring in my opinion, Placidus X's giant nuke, where the music basically fades away when he does the attack and you get this amazing sound effect. It's so good. But spectacle attacks aside, I think mechanically this boss is also great. Phase 1 is not very engaging in my opinion, but it's solid enough. But phase 2 and onwards is great. I love his dive attacks where you first need to locate him and either roll it or walk to the outer edge and then roll it. I absolutely love his teleportation attacks where he teleports and you get a very slight window of punishing if you successfully dodge these teleporting claws, which have a very tight hitbox, so it's quite hard to dodge them in my opinion. And of course I need to mention it, his super attack with the 2 lasers is just amazing and insanely satisfying to dodge. Overall, Placidus X is an insanely memorable boss and definitely a great boss fight. However, I still think Midir is the number 1 when it comes to dragons. I just really like Rykard. I like him so much in fact that I actually made an own video for him. Basically, Rykard is the gimmick boss of Elden Ring, akin to Yorm or the Storm King, and I think he is by far the best one. One big aspect of that is that the weapon you get is actually a really cool one with a unique moveset for this boss fight, unlike like the Storm Ruler where you just have one weapon art in Dark Souls 3 for example. It's really fun to play with this weapon and Rykard's moveset is also great. Yes, I agree, the Earthquake attack in phase 1 when he burrows into the ground is not the best attack and I think it can be quite annoying, but I think besides that phase 1 is overall just a really fun first phase, and phase 2 possibly has the best presentation in the entirety of Elden Ring in my opinion. I'm not sure about this one because all the bosses just have amazing presentation, but I think this phase is just something special. I think the Skull Rain attack is one of the coolest moves in the game, however it's a double-edged sword because I think it's not super engaging to actually dodge it because you just need to run away. Yes, I know you can interrupt him, but I still wish he could only do it like once in the fight, maybe at the start. I think it can get a bit annoying if he spams. I had fights where he did it like 4 times and yeah, that can definitely get a bit boring. But on the more positive side, the music in phase 2 is one of the best tracks in Elden Ring. It fits the fight perfectly. Rykard's design is also one of my favorites by From Software. It's an apostle from Berserk and Berserk is also my favorite story of all time, so it's just a fantastic boss fight and one of the most memorable ones on my first playthrough. And I think we all know what cemented it as one of the most memorable. Yeah, the voice actor is just great. Overall, Rykard, great boss, and probably one of the highest A's I give in Elden Ring. Godric the Grafted is the first amazing tier boss in this ranking and we're only like halfway through. It really shows how good the Remembrance boss quality is in my opinion. I was unsure whether I should put him as the lowest S tier or the highest A tier, but I decided he has so much going for him that I just have to put him in S because he's just an amazing boss. I absolutely adore the build up throughout Limgrave and Stormvale, which is also one of the best areas in the series, and forgive me if I sound like a broken record, but his presentation is once again just insanely memorable. The cutscene where he cuts off his arm and uses it as a flamethrower, and just the voice actor in general, he also goes out, just like Rykard's one. It's just such a fun fight and so memorable. However, also the fighting component is really fun. I think Godric is quite simple. However, his delays are very challenging and I really enjoy dodging all of his moves. He is also the boss that taught me on my first run that jumping over attacks is sometimes more efficient than just rolling them. And I think that's a very key and important lesson for the entire playthrough. So I actually appreciate him for that. It was very helpful on my first run. While he isn't that challenging anymore, he's the most important thing. He's a fun fight. And if you fight him with low level weapons and the fight actually can go on and you reach the climax of the soundtrack in phase 2, it's just one of the most epic early game fights I've ever had the pleasure to face. It's just such a good fight. I would say we should go chronologically for this fight. First, when you enter this boss's arena, after getting flashbanged, you will witness one of the game's most memorable moments. I'm just going to play it. The main theme music kicking in as a final boss theme is just one of the coolest things in the entire game, and I loved it so much. The Radagon phase is a fantastic fight. Radagon phase alone is an S+ tier boss, and he would probably be top 5 bosses. His moveset is so good. I love the way he uses AoEs. I love his special triple circle attack where you have to dodge the first two and circle around the third one. It's such a cool ultimate attack, and I just really enjoy everything in this fight. His projectiles, his teleporting, it's so good. Definitely one of the highlights. His design is also amazing, and as already mentioned, the soundtrack is just peak. However, this boss fight has a rather unconventional second part, and I have to say, I'm not an Elden Beast hater. Quite the opposite. I think the Elden Beast is amazing. However, it just isn't as amazing as Radagon. That's why this boss fight is on the lower side of the list. It's still an amazing tier boss, and I have to be honest, the leap from Godric to this boss is quite huge. Elden Beast, it has such an alien design, it looks so weird, and I absolutely enjoy it because it just fits for what it's supposed to be perfectly. The arena is absolutely stunning, though it can make problems mechanically because of the borders. However, it's fine. I think the spectacle more than makes up for it. The Elden Beast's moveset is honestly really fun. Elden Stars might possibly be one of the worst attacks in the game, but at least this tracking break exists, and honestly, funnily enough, in this attempt I actually had quite a solid Elden Stars moment where it didn't like rush me but only did some chip damage. But I'm personally not a big fan of attacks that deal basically forced chip damage in Souls games, so I think Elden Stars is quite a bad attack. However, everything else the Elden Beast does is just honestly really fun. I love all the holy projectiles, the AoEs, just a very cool boss. Thematically also just a perfect conclusion to the game. Some people say this boss fight was made with Torrent in mind, and of course I have no idea, I can't prove or disprove it, but I think Torrent would make some moves just too easy, while some would be pretty much impossible to dodge, so I actually think this boss fight works quite well without Torrent. Also, as final thing I need to mention, the triple Elden Ring attack where you need to jump over them was so good on my first playthrough. It was amazing, absolutely loved it. Just an amazing boss. Malekith is the boss in the ranking, where it goes from great and amazing bosses to the absolutely top tier ones. I love everything about this fight. His design is one of the best in the game, his lore is absolutely amazing, and I love that the Beast Clergyman is tied to a side quest you can do in the game, makes the fight even more impactful. His soundtrack is one of the most underrated in the entire game. I absolutely love how Phase 1 incorporates some of the Farum Azula ambience, and I also really enjoy Phase 2. I think it's a banger, and I think it fits the fight perfectly. Just watch this. Very underrated soundtrack if you ask me. But not only everything presentation wise about this fight is amazing, I also think mechanically this is also one of the best fights in the game. First phase is already a high A tier phase. It's very fun to dodge his quick swipes, and if you dodge all of it successfully, you will bait out the overhead charge, which leaves a massive punish window. It's so satisfying to learn this, and he was one of my favorite bosses, especially on my first level 1 run. Just an amazing fight. However, at the halfway point of this fight, one of the most amazing things in the game happened. The mid-transition cutscene is one of the best in the entirety of Elden Ring. I think the voice acting, his pitched voice, the music that starts playing during it, the animations and the visuals make for one of the best mid-fight cutscenes I have ever seen, only topped by the obvious number 1 in this series. And yeah, after this transition, you fight a S tier phase. Malekith the Black Plate is just amazing. His swipes, the way he fights, basically being this tired animal, is just so good, fits perfectly for his character, and of course the best attacks he has are all of them combined with Destined Death. I love dodging all of his projectiles and avoiding his flurries based on positioning. It's just so fun, genuinely just an amazing phase. Malekith is the first boss I would call God tier. Starscourge Radahn is amazing. Where I mentioned that Rykard possibly has the best presentation, actually this might go to Radahn. Plus Radahn definitely has the best build-up. Everything that has to do with the Radahn festival is just so cool. The cutscene you get of him, it's just amazing. Personally, I really enjoy that you can charge with all the warriors against Radahn, but I never really summoned because doing Radahn solo is just pure fun. Phase 1 is already a really fun phase and gets you familiar with the fight. However, Phase 2 is where the fight goes to God tier. The meteor attack uses to start phase 2 is one of the most memorable on my first run, and it's just a super cool attack. Besides that, everything in phase 2 is just insanely fun. I love that you jump over the gravity shockwaves and can punish them for more damage. I love the 4 meteors. I love the spinning move where he flies into the sky. It's just such a cool moveset and fun every time. Also, the soundtrack for phase 2, as I mentioned like a million times on this channel by now, is genuinely one of the best in Elden Ring. That phase 2 male choir is just absolutely amazing. Radahn is not a boss I loved from the beginning. I always thought he was great, but actually preferred Godric on my first run. But nowadays, oh man, I just really think Radahn is one of the best bosses they ever made. He's just amazing. Mohg, Lord of Blood, the boss that gatekeeps the DLC and also happens to be one of FromSoft's finest work. I think Mohg is just a masterpiece in nearly all regards. He has my favorite soundtrack in the game. Every second of it is absolutely amazing, and it's just one of the best soundtracks in gaming. It's so fucking good. His design is fantastic. I love his lore. He is a disturbing evil character, and everything he has done to Miquella, it's just so well made. And his fight also happens to be one of the most interesting ones. Phase 1 is rather basic, but still very fun, but phase 2 is just absolutely god tier. The new moves he added, the wings he grows that allow for his new moves to be really cinematic and epic, and the most important part, the blood trails he leaves behind after all attacks are absolutely fantastic. One of the best additions to make a fight harder. They force you to pay really close attention to your positioning, how you engage this boss, and they're not bullshit at all. Even if you should get some chip damage from them, which by the way is not required, you can definitely no hit this boss with this, but even if you should get some chip damage, as long as you don't keep standing in there and don't proc bleed, it's not a big issue. It's just something you have to keep in mind. So it basically just forces you to pay attention even more. It's just so good. Also, Mohg has to have the coolest mid-fight transition I've ever seen in a game. The Nihil mechanic is so fucking cool. I love that you can negate the effect with a crystal tear if you explore, but it's not really necessary. I really enjoy this idea that From Software takes some of your healings, which honestly you have plenty of in the late game, to make the fight harder. It's such a cool and creative gimmick. I absolutely adore Nihil, always did. Mechanically, I could argue that there are some better bosses in this game, but I just think this boss, the way he's presented and everything that has to do with him is just so good. He is just amazing, and he also used to be my favorite fight in the game and was definitely my second favorite on my first playthrough. He's just so good, genuinely just an amazing boss. Nobody dislikes Godfrey. I think Elden Ring bosses have been controversial for some reason, and I don't fully understand what most people are on about, to be honest, but Godfrey is just one of those bosses no one hates. He's just so fair, so great, and just so fun. No one has anything against this boss. He's also one of the fan favorites by far. He is such a cool character, was definitely a key part in the marketing of the game, and it's just one of the most memorable fights in the entire game. His design is absolutely fantastic, and both of his phases are great. First phase is this huge warrior with an axe, which is very fun, and it got foreshadowed a bit by Godfrey, which was very cool, but honestly it was just a very small look into the fight. When he starts buffing himself in his first phase and does the area-wide AoEs, the fight ascends to god tier for me. It's just so good, and you have to be very careful with your healing windows because he can interrupt you arena-wide. It's just so great. Also, I absolutely love how dynamic this moveset is. His combo extensions are just so smooth. This boss doesn't do any breaks. He will just extend his combo or stop, and you have to react accordingly. It's so good. I love phase 1 already a high S tier phase. The music is also just great. However, this is only the halfway point of the fight. At half health, Godfrey decides to get rid of his Lion Sarosh that suppresses his bloodlust and goes full on Horalu mode. Now he fights you with his bare hands and nothing but grabs and deadly punches. And this phase is one of the most challenging in the game for me. The delays, the grabs, everything he does is just so cool, and especially this attack where he starts flailing around with his hands is one of the hardest in the game to dodge for me, and it's so good. Also, the soundtrack for phase 2 is just super unique and something I never heard in these games before. It fits his primal nature perfectly though, so it's very good. With that said, Godfrey is definitely a god tier boss, one of the best From Software has ever made, but the remaining 2 spots are bosses that I would easily consider like top 5 of all time worthy. So with that said, let's get into the best of the best. Morgit the Omen King is one of the best bosses in the entire Souls series, and also probably my personal favorite character in Elden Ring. I love that you're introduced to this guy way before you even fight him, as his second persona, Margit the Fell Omen. Very awesome foreshadowing, just a super cool reveal. I also think Morgit is probably my favorite first boss cutscene in the entire series, at least from the top of the head right now. It's so cool how he calls out all the demigods, and I don't know, the voice actor for Margit and, well, Morgit is just absolutely incredible. Big shout out. My favorite in the entire Souls series, just fantastic work.
Pillagers, emboldened by the flame of ambition.
The fight is also just amazing. The arena at the foot of the Earth Tree is so cool, amazing. Godfrey uses the same one and it's fucking great. His soundtrack is also one of my personal favorites in Elden Ring, super underrated as well. Very good soundtrack. I absolutely adore the face transition. It's so good because of the voice actor's voice lines. Just an amazing fight. But of course, I need to talk about the most important thing in the entire fight, his mechanics. Mechanically, this might be the best or second best boss in the Souls series, excluding Sekiro in my opinion. He has everything. Positioning based attacks, mix-ups, follow-ups. It's just so complex. This fight honestly took me so long to even understand the basics of it, but it's so worth it. It's probably the second most fun fight in the entire game for me. It's just so good. In general, all of his moves are tight. They need directional rolling. It's just such a good fight. Phase 2 adds some very cool blood flame attacks, which are very easy to avoid, but still quite fun. One attack I'm a bit iffy on is his mega combo in Phase 2, but to be honest, I just haven't found a way to deal with it better than just run away. Unfortunately, it's just that for me. But to be honest, it's not a problem when everything else is perfection. I'm truly hyped for the DLC to see if they are able to surpass Morgit mechanically, because I think mechanically he might even be the number one in the game, but just not my personal favorite mechanically. With that said, he's still probably top 5 in the series for me, and just an incredible boss fight. We finally arrive at my number 1 spot in the ranking. But not only is this my favorite boss in Elden Ring, not only is it my favorite boss in the entire Soulsborne series, it's also my favorite boss of all time. And why I think Malenia is that great, I will explain in a very short while. However, first I need to make a disclaimer. I understand not liking this boss. I think learning Malenia is possibly one of the most difficult and simultaneously possibly most frustrating experiences you can have in the entire Souls series. Learning Waterfall especially can be very overwhelming, but also her regular moveset is very hard. However, on the other hand, she is a super boss that is very well hidden and super optional, so you never really need to fight her to begin with. Her stagger, cancellation and hyper armor may seem confusing at first, but they are very consistent if you learn them, and definitely not bullshit like some people like to claim. I think it's great that this boss is so difficult, and after learning it, it became my favorite boss of all time. And I think a big reason for that is that this boss genuinely broke me. I thought I was just too bad for the Souls series going forward, but after countless hours, like 13 hours on my first level 1 run, I finally understood this boss, and I think it's just fantastic. So now let's talk about everything great about this boss. I think one very great aspect about this boss, as for all the bosses, let's say it for the last time, is the presentation. Yes, the arena can lead to some jank, but I think it's quite rare in my opinion, and I think the arena is great overall. Besides that, Malenia's design is amazing. She was marketed as one of the poster children of Elden Ring, and the collector's edition even has a statue of her which just looks super badass. I love it. And Phase 2's design is even better. I think her music is top 3 in Elden Ring for me. It's absolutely amazing, and I absolutely adore every single part of that soundtrack, especially that Phase 2 climax. It's so damn good. I think Phase 1 alone is an insanely high S tier phase. It's so good. I love how her combos flow, how absolutely amazingly you can avoid some of her attacks by just standing an inch away from her blade and then punishing with a thrusting attack. It's so satisfying. I love how you can use directional rolls to avoid attacks more efficiently. After learning it, Waterfall Dance is so satisfying. This method where you run away, it's super consistent and great, but also the rolling strat is just amazing. Just overall a very fun phase phase already. But where the fight ascends to god tier is phase 2. After this fantastic cutscene, phase 2 starts with the Scarlet Aeonia attack, which is very cool, but I wish she only did it once per fight. That's probably one of my only minor issues I have with this boss, but like, it's not really relevant. Besides that, the way that she can do waterfall pretty much every time now adds extra anxiety. The way she can't end her attack chains earlier or extend them even further is also very terrifying and super dangerous and needs to be kept in mind. The after explosions you can space perfectly are amazing, and of course my favorite attack in the entire series probably, or at least in Elden Ring, the clone attack from Malenia. It's just so satisfying to avoid. Just one of the best attacks ever made. It's so great. Visually, this fight also just looks fantastic in every regard. Her lore is also top notch. Overall, Malenia just does everything perfectly, and she's well deserved my favorite boss in the entirety of gaming for me. Yes, there are some other great bosses from Armored Core 6 for example, but I think Malenia just takes the cake. Thank you so much for watching this ranking. I think the Elden Ring boss roster is one of the best in the entirety of gaming, and I love these bosses so much, which is probably very apparent from the video. If you have some disagreements or agree with some takes or have some completely different takes, please be sure to let me know in the comments. I'm very interested in discussions about my favorite bosses. Besides that, Shadow of the Erdtree is releasing in like 3 to 4 days, which is just incredible to me. I can't believe how quickly the time passed. If you're interested in more Elden Ring and especially Shadow of the Erdtree content, please be sure to subscribe. I will be ranking and reviewing everything there. Besides that, everyone be careful of spoilers. They are currently everywhere and I personally seen some things, so be careful. And yeah, besides that, thank you again for watching, and I hope we have one of the most fun experiences in gaming in the DLC in a few days. Take care everyone, and bye!